everyone, I'm Maddie and today we're talking about how much money I've spent. It's a lot.
Alright everyone, put on your opera glasses because it's time to present Maestro Mickey Mouse and the Philharmagic Orchestra.
So for those of you who are new to my channel, welcome! I am just about to start the Disney's Cultural Exchange program from Australia for 2019 from January to June. So it's a 5-month program, and today I want to talk about how much money it is costing me to go on this program. I will say up front, it is a lot. If you are freaked out by it, please don't be scared. I don't want this video to be discouraging, but I feel like it's important to be informed about the costs because I wasn't as fully informed as I thought I might be, because going into the program I had done a fair amount of research, but the problem was that a lot of these people talking about how much they spent was from a couple of years ago when the exchange rate was so much better. It was almost 1-to-1, and also they weren't having to travel as much, so they were often from Melbourne or Sydney. So today I'm going to give a slightly different perspective on how much money it can cost. So this isn't the be all and end all. You may spend a lot less, but it is also possible to spend a lot more as well, depending on how much money you spend on flights, how much you have to travel for interviews, etc. To clarify, when we're talking about US dollars, I'm going to be going with the most recent sort of exchange rate, which has been around 69 Australian cents per $1 US dollar, which is not particularly favourable, which is why some of these costs have blown out so much compared to what I was originally expecting. So to get started, in case you are a bit worried about how I'm sounding and if you've skipped ahead in the video to see how much money it actually adds up to, have this consolation. It does not cost anything to apply. And so even if you're still weighing up whether you want to spend this money and whether you want to go ahead with the process, still apply, because it costs absolutely nothing to just send in that application. So if you are successful in your application and you are offered an interview, you may have some costs associated with it. If you are in Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth or Sydney, you have nothing to worry about because there will be an interview held at a university near you. However, if you do not live in those places, or there's an issue with the timing and you're unable to make the one in your city, you may have to travel. And in my case, the only one I could make was in Brisbane. There was none in my city, even though it is a capital city of one of the states of Australia. Nothing ever comes to Adelaide for no particular reason. So I had to travel to Brisbane, and so as a result I did have to pay for both flights and accommodation. Now, I did spend a bit more on accommodation than possibly necessary because I actually extended out my trip by a couple of days so that I could visit Brisbane and also have a few lessons while I was there to kind of justify taking time out of university. So after the interview, if you've been successful, you will then receive an offer. This is on the condition that you pay the fee. So there is a registration fee that everyone has to pay, including college program participants. It was for us $375 US. This may change in the future, I don't know, but that's how much we had to pay. And this covers housing for until you start working, as well as administration fees. Next up, after you've paid your fees and you're like, what next? You'll get an email about a police check. So this is just something that everyone has to do as part of the employment process. As Australians, we do the Australian Federal Police Check. It costs around $42, so it's not too bad. You just fill in a form online and it gets sent to you, so no big deal. After this, we start getting to the interesting stuff, and that's visa applications. So about a month later, I think it was mid-October, that I received the DS2019 form from Disney. Now this is the form that you need to be able to start the visa application process, because of course, as a cultural exchange participant, you are coming in on the J1 visa. So to start during the online application process, you'll have a couple of fees to pay for. So the first thing you'll have is a $35 US SEVIS fee, which is associated with the J1 cultural exchange visa, and then also an application fee as well. After that, you will book your visa interview. Now, to apply for a US visa, you have to go in person to a US consulate to do a very short interview. So if you are in Melbourne, Sydney, or Perth, you see the trend here. You will have no problems because there is a US consulate in your city, and so you can just go book an appointment for whichever local consulate you have and go to the appointment. If you live in any other city, you are going to have to travel and unfortunately probably stay overnight because the majority of the visa interviews all take place in the morning and you do not want to miss your interview. So as a result, I had to fly over to Sydney and stay in a hotel overnight. Now, thankfully for this one, I didn't actually pay for flights. They were paid for by frequent flyer points from my dad. So, thank you. I could have been at least another couple $100 more than I actually have in my total, but, you know. So I paid for accommodation for one night, flew in the night before, stayed one night, had the interview, flew out that afternoon. Pretty straightforward, but still cost a fair bit of money. And while you are at the interview, you are going to have to pay a reciprocity fee. I think that's how you say it. It's just a fee that you have to pay because Australians charge Americans for something, so the Americans charge. I don't get why it's a thing, but everyone applying for a visa in Australia has to pay this fee. Now, if you're in New Zealand, you don't have to worry about this one. You're all good. But if you're an Australian, you just have to pay an extra, I think it was like 148, 150 Australian dollars, because they automatically, when you pay, charge it in Australian rather than US. Oh well. And now we get on to the really big stuff, and that is flights. So I know some people actually book their flights as soon as they got their offer. Personally, I waited until I had my visas sorted out because I didn't know for certain if I was going to get the visa sorted out in time before I went to Europe. So the whole actually going on the program was still a bit up in the air. Thankfully, I got it all sorted and then I purchased my flights. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about booking flights and my personal strategies for getting a good flight at a good price, but I will say that there were cheaper flights available, but for my own reasons, which I will discuss in a later video, I didn't choose to take them. So as a result, it cost me a bit over $2,000 to get a return flight to Orlando. So this is flying Delta, and unfortunately, because I live in Adelaide, I have to have a domestic connection first before I can do the international Sydney to LA flight. So if you live in, I think, Sydney, Brisbane and Melbourne, they all have direct flights to America, so you won't have an extra leg on the way there. And also keep in mind that prices do go up suddenly and very quickly and unpredictably. So that flight I got for $2,000 was actually discounted through a student travel agency here in Australia. However, the price went up by about $200 or $300 over the weekend while I was thinking over whether I should book a return flight or not. Nothing much you can do about that, so costs may vary on that one. Now, along with flights, I also booked travel insurance. So I booked this as a bookend policy where I got the only times when I was flying, not for the whole duration of my trip, although I know some people do that as well, which is also a considerable extra cost. And now for the cost that I wasn't expecting to be as much as it was, and that is health insurance. Now, I should have expected this, I should have seen it coming, but as part of doing the J1 Cultural Exchange Program, it is mandatory as part of your visa to have health insurance. And it is also part of your agreement with Disney and the terms of your employment to have a particular insurance by Lloyd's of London. So they will send you a link with the details. There are two different prices, I can't remember exactly what they are, but there's a cheaper one and a slightly more expensive one. Personally, I went with the more expensive one because it's America. I do not want to get caught out with not enough health insurance because that would just be a financial disaster. So as a result, it was a bit over $700 US, but because of the current exchange rate, that ended up being a bit over 1,000 Australian dollars. So you might be thinking, oh my God, is that the cost? What? But there's a tiny bit more, not too much more, but a little bit more. And that is the hotel cost for the day before check-in. So I'm flying in the night before because I do not want to get caught out on the morning of and flights cancelled. who knows what's happened, you just want a bit of leeway. So me and a couple of other friends, we booked in for an all-star resort and it was a bit under $50 per person. Australian, not US, Australian. So worked out really cheaply. There was a bit of a sale going on. We didn't get that much of a discount because it was a value resort, but keep an eye out for discounts in hotels. And finally, yes, finally, we're at the end. Almost done. The damage is almost done. The final thing on this list is to do with budgeting for the first couple of weeks of the program before we start working and getting paid. So this is to cover the cost of things for the apartment, food, just getting set up in America in those first couple of weeks. So I've set aside $700 for that. I do have some additional sort of play money that will go towards things like merch, dining, and my Universal Pass, but in this list, I'm only talking about the very essentials, so I'm not including that in my budget. So there we have it. That's the total. It's not nice when you see it all in one lump, but do keep in mind that this is spread out over at least several months. You have time to save up extra money while paying for these things in increments. You do have a few massive lump sums in terms of the flights and the health insurance, but the rest of it are sort of slightly smaller payments made at various times. And if you think about it, the cost of, say, going on a study tour to London, which I did earlier this year, was actually a bit more expensive than this. So for the value of, say, going overseas for a couple of weeks, you're getting 5 months at Disney. So I can't tell you yet whether it was worth the money because I haven't actually done the program yet. I'm going in a couple of weeks, but I can say that it is doable and I don't feel like I've wasted my money in doing this just yet. We'll see. But in the meantime, let me know in the comments down below if you've done the program, how much money did you spend and do you think it was worth it? And if you're preparing to go on the program, how much money have you already spent? Or do you think you want to spend this much money on the program? I really don't want this to be discouraging, and I hope that this has helped you in informing you about how much money you should save up and give you a clearer idea of just how much it costs to do the program. So if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button down below if you want to see more content. Now, I am only a couple of weeks away from going to Disney and I am so excited. There's so much content coming out in the next couple of weeks, and then of course starting my program, I'm going to be vlogging that as well, so stay tuned for more videos. But until then, TTFN!